to the Howie Silbiger Show on the True Talk Radio Network. Get in on the conversation. Call 1-877-669-1292.
I am Howie Silbiger. This is the Howie Silbiger Show on the True Talk Radio Network. Keep in mind that at midnight, we will be doing Political Hitman live right here on the True Talk Radio Network and on Israel News Talk Radio. So Political Hitman comes up live at midnight. So stay tuned for that. It's just a couple of hours away. I wanted to get on the air just now. I want to get on the air tonight just to talk to you. I know we did a show last night, but I want to get on the air tonight to talk to you also. I really feel that there's a lot to talk about. And, of course, if you want to get in on the conversation, the number to call is 1-877-669-1292. If you're watching online in any of the many different streaming areas that we're streaming online, you can feel free to type into the message box, and the message will pop up on my screen. But, of course, it's a talk show, so always feel free to call in at 1-877-669-1292. So much has happened in the last 24 hours that I think that we should talk. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has been released from Walter Reed Hospital and has returned to the White House. He has returned to the White House, and he is saying now that he's free of symptoms of COVID, and that people should not worry about COVID. Of course, this blew the minds of the lefties. They went nuts. What do you mean you shouldn't worry about COVID? Hundreds of thousands of people have died of COVID. And you're right, hundreds of thousands of people have died of COVID. But the left wing went nuts, because they go nuts anytime Donald Trump says anything. They parse every syllable. They parse every letter, and they interpret it in such weird ways sometimes. What he meant was that the majority of people who get the disease will survive the disease. The majority of the people who get the disease will be okay, and that people shouldn't be living their lives in fear of the disease. That does not mean that we shouldn't be vigilant. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be careful. Doesn't mean we shouldn't follow all health directives, and try to avoid passing the disease on to other people. So if you're living in a town, in a city, somewhere that has health directives, you should be following them. But what he did mean was that we should be vigilant, but we should also be human, and we should also live our lives. That we shouldn't live in fear. We shouldn't be locked in our basements, trembling under blankets, because this disease is out there. There are plenty of killers out there, plenty of diseases out there that will kill people, and this is one of them. It's killed a lot of people. But we shouldn't be living in fear of it. And this is really the message that Donald Trump was trying to convey. That was warped totally out of space by the lefties, and the leftists tend to do that. They tend to warp things way out of proportion. They take things that are pretty innocuous, and they make big deals about them. But they only do it when it refers to Donald Trump or the Republicans. When Joe Biden makes a comment like, the only reason I could be in my bunker, the only reason I could stay in isolation in my basement is because black women stock grocery shelves, and he said it, and you could check out the Howie Silbiger Show group. I posted the video of him actually saying that. When Joe Biden comes up with statements like that, the left wing don't even mention it. Not even an iota of a mention. They ignore it. So it's called selective outrage. And selective outrage isn't a new phenomenon. Selective outrage has happened for a very, very long time. People pick and choose what triggers them, what gets them angry, what gets them upset. They pick and they choose to ignore stuff that doesn't get them upset. Now, this works on both sides of the political spectrum. It's not unique to the left wing. It works on both sides of the political spectrum. And it is generally what causes political strife between people. People who don't have a vested interest in the politics of anything get really upset with each other because the selective choice of what gets people upset and not. For instance, I'll use an example, practical example of this show. I've been doing this show for probably around a quarter of a century, right around 25 years. I've been doing this show in various different formats, but this show has been continuously produced for about 25 years. Now, in the 25 years I've been doing radio and this show, and this show is initially a radio show. In the 25 years I've been doing this show, I have said things that that people have interpreted as hateful or interpreted as problematic. I've lost jobs over things I've said on the show because people interpreted it. And they interpreted it based on their own biases, not based on anything I said, but based on their bias. So they heard something I said or they read something I had written, and they interpreted based on their bias, and then made a decision to condemn me or to fire me or to censure me in some way or another, based on their perception of what I said rather than what I said. Selective outrage. And selective outrage is never helpful. It's always good to have all the information that you could possibly get on any topic before you make an informed decision on whether you support or don't support the topic. I have been very open about the fact that I watch 3 or 4 different news networks on a regular basis. And the reason I do that is because I want to get the different perspectives. I want to understand where each side stands on an issue before I make an informed decision on where I stand on the issue. It is that simple. If I don't watch CNN or MSNBC, and that generally have an opinion that is contrary to the opinion that I hold, but if I do not watch these networks, I would never understand the philosophy or the point of view of the people who have an opposing philosophy of mine, people who disagree with me. I wouldn't understand them, and so that is why I generally try to keep myself up to date on the different perspectives. When I used to teach debate, and I taught debate at a high school level, when I used to teach debate, that was the first thing I taught my debaters. I said, listen, you have to know their argument better than you know your argument. You have to be able to argue both sides of the issue. If you can't argue both sides of the issue, you can't argue your side of the issue. It's as simple as that. You have to understand the entire issue from both sides, both perspectives. Now, most people who argue politics, and I've been noticing this a lot lately, don't bother to learn the other side. They don't bother to read dissenting opinions. They don't bother to watch a network that doesn't play into their point of view, their perspective. So they lose, and it's really a loss, and it's an unfortunate loss, but it's really a loss. They lose the ability to argue their point effectively because they don't understand the opposing point of view. So you have to understand the opposing point of view in order to argue your point of view effectively. If you don't, then you're just basically talking out of your butt, as the old expression goes. 1-877-669-1292. 1-877-669-1292. So what basically happens is people start talking out of their butt, and they repeat some talking point they hear on CNN or on MSNBC or on Fox News, because it goes both ways. It's both perspectives. And they repeat these talking points. And then after they repeat the talking points, if they are challenged on the points that they made, they don't have an answer. So I heard some talking head on television say this. So I parroted what that talking head said on television, on Facebook or on Twitter, on Instagram, or wherever I'm arguing politics. I parroted that idea that was expressed on this TV network. And then I was challenged on that idea. So somebody came by and said, hey, wait a second. You believe in that? What about this? And they challenged on the idea. And then there's no answer. So where do these people go? So what happens to the people who express an idea they heard somewhere else? They didn't really think it out. They didn't really research it. And then are challenged on that idea. they immediately go to personal insults. Because in debate, in political debate, in any debate, when you have nothing left to argue, when there's no substance to argue, they revert to personal insults. The second you hear a debater on television, anywhere else, if somebody's in the middle of a conversation and suddenly turns and insults the other person, think about the presidential debates, that means that whatever topic they're talking about, whoever started the insulting didn't have anything to say. They had no idea, zero idea on how to answer to counterpoint. So if they had zero idea on how to counterpoint, that essentially means that they lost the debate. I always taught my debaters that when your opponent resort to insulting, personal insults, then you've lost the debate. There's nothing left to talk about. What else is there to talk about? How could you talk about anything else when you're insulting the other guy? It doesn't work. So that's the way I saw it. That's the way I see debate. And so when online debates happen, and I watch and I moderate the Howie Silbiger Show group, and I moderate the group, and I read pretty much everything that's posted there. When I see it resort to personal insults, or when people complain to me that, oh, this guy insulted me, I take a look at the context of it, and I try to make a decision based on the context of the conversation. Now, sometimes it is a personal insult, and sometimes you got to rebuke somebody or remove a post. But most of the time, it's a political argument that the other guy just didn't have any idea on how to respond to. And so that's essentially what happens. And then you're stuck. You're reading this and you're watching this and you're thinking, well, these people are supposed to be intelligent people, and now they're just insulting each other. What's going on here? But if you understand that the active philosophy is that once you resort to personal insults in the middle of a debate, you've lost the debate is over, then you understand exactly where these people are standing. So, I'm sorry I'm giving you a theory class here, but it's important to understand this. So when I have guests on the show and we talk, and sometimes, and this happens sometimes, I'll ask the guest a question, and the guest will turn to me and says, "You're an idiot." Once that happens, then I know right away that guest is not really well read on the topic we're talking about. And if they're not well read on the topic they're resorting to a personal insult because they don't know how to answer the question I asked them, or they don't have a counterpoint to the point I made. And once you understand that while you're in a political, philosophical debate, once you understand that philosophy, once that concept permeates into your brain and you get it, then you realize how ridiculous some political debates are. So that brings us to the political debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The sad part about the debate between Biden and Trump, and there's another one coming up next week, but the sad part about the debate that already aired between Biden and Trump is that these are the two candidates for president. That is the sad part. The sad part is that this is supposed to be the cream of the crop, the top of the political echelon, the most qualified people to run the country. And both men acted like babies. Both men acted like immature 12-year-olds, having a schoolyard argument. Now, should we be disturbed by this? I really think we should be disturbed by this. There is no reason why we should not be disturbed by this. I found it very disturbing to watch. I found it entertaining because I like watching schoolyard arguments. I have no issue with watching schoolyard arguments. So I found it quite entertaining that two grown men in their 70s would be having a childish fight the way that Joe Biden and the way that Donald Trump had during their debate. But at the same time, I lamented for the times where there were serious politicians out there and where the idea of becoming president of the United States of America was actually a noble idea, not a joke the way it's become. And it's become a joke not because of the politicians. It hasn't become a joke because of Donald Trump. And I know a lot of people are going to write to me and say to me, hey, Howie, it's Donald Trump that made it a joke. It's not true. The media made the presidency a joke. By mocking the president relentlessly for 4 years, by not allowing the president to serve his term properly, like every other president got to serve their term, by Congress and congressional leaders treating the president in the disrespectful way they've treated this president, they have caused the office of the president to be diminished. And that is a shame. It is really a shame. I make no secret about this. I have been a supporter of the United States of America. I've been a fan of the United States of America since I'm a kid. I love American history. I love everything American. My bar mitzvah, and I'll be honest, my bar mitzvah was American themed. It was red, white, and blue. I am a through and through American, even though I am not. And to watch the destruction of the political process, the political system, and potentially the destruction of the country happening before my eyes is painful. I mean, I know the sacrifices that were made to build this country, and I understand the philosophy behind the country. And to watch it fall apart the way it's falling apart, and to know that it's falling apart for partisan political points rather than a legitimate beef, really makes me sad. When I watch the Black Lives Matter and Antifa people beating up people in the streets and burning down cities, and that's still happening. The media stopped covering it, but it's still happening. When I watch these things happen, and I realize that they are only in the streets not for social justice like they claimed that they were, not because George Floyd was killed by a drug overdose and a cop's knee on his neck, not because some guy was shot in the back, but they're there because they want to destroy America. They're there because they're being paid there to be there to cause strife before an American election so that the current president won't get reelected. Mark my words. Mark my words. If Donald Trump loses the election, all these Black Lives Matters and Antifa people will disappear. The reason, the people funding them who want to get rid of Donald Trump will actually stop funding them. And so once they're stopped funded, these people aren't going on into the streets anymore. So you're going to see these riots will continue after Donald Trump gets elected, if he gets reelected. And if he doesn't get reelected, this will all vanish as if it never existed. And that's how you know that it was all a political ploy. All right, Paul wrote in on Facebook, the moderator was lousy at controlling the debate. Wallace kept having a side debate with Trump, and that's not what he was there for. And you're 100% right, Paul. When you're a moderator, I've been a moderator at quite a few political debates. We used to have the political debates on the Howie Silbiger show all the time. Anytime we had a federal election for the last 25 years, we always had some candidates. We had municipal candidates and federal candidates on the show, debating on the show. And my idea of being a moderator for a debate was even if I held an affinity for a political position, I would never, ever express that during a debate if I was the moderator. I would not pick on one candidate over another candidate, even though I liked one candidate better. I would ask equally as hard questions to one as I would to the other. Now, if you could find the archives of some of the debates I have, the tapes speak for themselves. And I was neutral during the debates because that's what a moderator does. They stay neutral. They control the flow of the debate. They control the topics on the debate, but they stay neutral. Paul, you are 100% right. Chris Wallace was not neutral during the presidential debate. He was obviously taking a side. And that is wrong, 100% wrong when it comes to people who host debates and people who are moderators. When I have two opposing positions on the show, two people on the show with me who have opposing positions, I try to stay as neutral as possible. And the reason is because it makes it much more interesting for the viewer and much more informative. If the moderator and and one of the candidates is beating up on another candidate, then what's the point of watching the debate? What's the candidate doing there? What's the other candidate doing there? If you have to choose between the two people who are debating, then you should be hearing the viewpoints of the two people debating, and not the viewpoints of the moderator. So I'm 100% in agreement with you, Paul. You are 100% right. 1-877-669-1292 is the number to call in. You could message me by just typing into the message box on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube. Anywhere you see this video, there's a message box. You could just type into the message box, and that message will pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to address your concerns and your comments through that message. But it would be much better if you called in. At midnight, I want to remind you, at midnight, I will be back here with Political Hitman. We start at midnight. We run to 1 a.m. So we'll be here at midnight again with Political Hitman. It'll be a completely different show, of course. And that'll air in Israel, and it'll air online exactly the way the show is airing online right now. So when I look at another freakout in the last day or so, Donald Trump had COVID-19. He is the president of the United States. His medical team is probably one of the best medical teams that you could get in the world. The President of the United States usually has the best medical personnel that's possible to get within his country. So, a couple of days after he was diagnosed with COVID-19, he went to the hospital right after diagnosis. He was treated with some experimental drugs, which I'm sure will be released to the public sometime soon. And then he did something that the left just went nuts over. They went totally bonkers. He got into his car, and he drove out, and he greeted the supporters that were standing outside of Walter Reed Medical Center. He didn't get out of the car. He wore a mask in the car, and he waved at the supporters. Now, there was only the pictures that were released of the car. You saw Donald Trump sitting in the car. You saw a couple of his guards sitting in the car with him in the front seat. It was impossible to know a couple of things. It was impossible to know if there was a barrier between the president and the guards that were in the car. Perhaps a plexiglass barrier, an invisible plexiglass barrier that wouldn't have been noticeable from outside of the car. It was impossible to know what the medical condition, the health condition of the president was when he got into the car. It was impossible to know what the health conditions of the guards were when they got into the car, or what kind of personal protection equipment they were wearing. But that didn't stop the left wing from lambasting Donald Trump, from frying him for getting into a car and driving outside of the Walter Reed Medical Center. They went after him. Now, of course, none of the people attacking him were his medical doctors. There was a medical doctor, Walter Reed, who said maybe it wasn't such a great idea, but there were a couple that said somebody must have signed off on it and thought it was an okay idea, that there was no problem, no issues with it. And then at the end of the day, the Secret Service. There was one Secret Service agent who wrote, "Oh my gosh, this was terrible." But at the end of the day, isn't it not terrible for the Secret Service when they have to jump in front of a bullet for the president? Their job is to protect the president. Their job's not to make judgment calls on the president. Their job's not to control the president's agenda. Their job is to protect the president no matter where he goes and what he does. The medical doctor's job is to decide if it's medically safe for the president to do what he's doing. So if the medical doctors had no issue with it, the Secret Service has no say. Those who don't want to put their lives in jeopardy or put their health at risk should not be in the Secret Service. The Secret Service's job is to protect the president. Their job is literally to jump in front of a bullet if some guy shoots at the president. That's their job. Their job is to sacrifice their life to protect the liberty of the United States. So anybody who was concerned about the Secret Service that was sitting in the car with the president should not be concerned. That is their job. Their job is to do that, to put themselves in danger. Whatever danger comes their way, their job is to put themselves in the front line to protect the president. Period. That's their job. So I don't know why people were criticizing the president. I'm just confused by that. Julian types in on Facebook, Is Trump's thinking impaired by his recovery drugs? I'm not a medical doctor. I can't answer that question. I am not a medical doctor. I'm not Trump's doctor. Now, if it was, then his doctors would have the constitutional right to inform the vice president and Congress that he is impaired, and then there's the 25th Amendment that comes into play there. The doctors did not say that Trump's thinking was impaired by his recovery drugs. There was a conspiracy theory running around that was debunked by the actual guy who was the center of the conspiracy theory. There was a conspiracy theory running around saying that Donald Trump Jr. was at odds with his family, that his father was crazy because of the drugs. Donald Trump Jr. was on television just yesterday and said that was all a load of bunk, that the reporter who wrote that, and this happens a lot when it comes to covering Trump, the reporter that wrote that made up the story. This is what Donald Trump Jr. said just yesterday. So that whole idea that Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., feels that his father his thinking was impaired by the recovery drugs, was made up by the reporter. It didn't come from Donald Trump Jr. So there you go. That happens a lot, by the way. You got to do your research. You got to watch. That's why I watch different networks, because sometimes you'll read something and I'll be like, that sounds a little weird. And then I'll see a report on CNN and say, that even sounds weirder. Then I'll flip over to MSNBC and they'll have a totally different report with a different perspective, and suddenly the pieces start getting together. Then I'll flip over to Fox News and they'll have a totally different perspective on the same story. And then you get the three different perspectives and you're like, now I kind of understand the story. At least I have a wide-ranging perspective on what the story is. And when I flipped over to Fox News and he was being interviewed, and Donald Trump Jr. said, "Hey, listen, they made up the story. I never said that." I have no reason to doubt him. I have no reason to doubt anybody who says I said it or I didn't say it. And I have no reason not to believe people when they do say stuff. So when someone says, "I want to kill you," or "I want to destroy your country," or someone says, "I hope the president dies," which happened a lot after he was diagnosed with COVID, I have no doubt and really no reason to doubt the people who said this. They're definitely 100% telling the truth. It's sad. It's scary that people think that way. It's kind of repulsive, but I have really no reason to doubt them. All right, so I'm going to get off now and take a little break, and we'll be back. I will be back at midnight with Political Hitman. Please join me then. I'm Howie Silbiger. This is the Howie Silbiger Show right here on the True Talk Radio Network. I'll see you at midnight.